Hello there, you helpless little ape. Not an insult, a statement of evolutionary fact. You were born completely, catastrophically, almost comically helpless, and that is a very strange thing to be. A foal stands up within an hour of birth. A baby wildebeest runs with the herd within minutes. Even a newborn chimp grips its mother's fur and climbs within hours. You couldn't hold your own head up for 3 months. This is not an accident of bad engineering. This is the solution to one of the strangest design problems in evolutionary history. We're opening the file. To understand why you arrived so unfinished, we need to go back about 4 million years, to the moment your ancestors stood up. Bipedalism, walking on 2 legs, was one of the great turning points of human evolution. It freed our hands, it let us range farther, it changed everything. But standing upright did something uncomfortable to our skeletons. It narrowed the pelvis. To walk efficiently on 2 legs, the hip socket has to sit differently, and that means the birth canal got tighter. At the same time, and here is where it gets uncomfortable, our brains were getting dramatically bigger. A modern human brain is roughly 3 times the volume of a chimp's. That brain has to fit through that narrowed pelvis. This is the obstetric dilemma. Big brain, narrow hips. Something has to give. The term was coined by physical anthropologist Sherwood Washburn in 1960. Washburn observed that human birth is uniquely dangerous and uniquely difficult compared to other primates, and he wanted to know why. His answer, walking upright and thinking big, had put us in an impossible mechanical bind. Evolution's solution was radical. Don't wait, ship the baby early, send it out before the head gets too big to fit, and finish the job on the outside. A human baby is born at about 9 months. If you compare us to other great apes adjusted for gestation and brain size, we should really be in there for 18 to 21 months. We leave the womb 9 months early. This idea that human infancy is essentially a second gestation happening outside the body was formalized by anthropologist Ashley Montagu. He called it exterogestation, gestation on the outside. The infant's nervous system, its sensory organs, its very personality, all of it is still being built in real time in the open air. Compare that to other mammals. Most are altricial, born helpless like us, or precocial, born ready to run. Among primates, we are an extreme outlier on the helpless end. A newborn chimp already has much of the motor control a human won't develop until year 1. Now, here is where the science gets genuinely contested. The classic obstetric dilemma, bipedalism narrowed the hips, big brain needed out early, was the dominant story for decades. Then in 2012, a study by Anna Warrener and colleagues threw a wrench in it. They found that wider hips don't actually make walking less efficient in humans, undermining the idea that locomotion was the limiting factor on pelvis width. So why aren't our hips wider? The answer may be metabolic. Holly Dunsworth and colleagues proposed in 2012 that it's actually the mother's metabolic ceiling that ends the pregnancy. Growing a brain that fast costs enormous energy, the mother simply runs out of metabolic runway to keep fueling that growth internally. Birth on this model is the point where it becomes cheaper to feed the baby from the outside. The current scientific consensus is that both factors are real. The pelvic geometry and the metabolic constraint work together. It's not one villain, it's a conspiracy. But here is the part that should genuinely astonish you. Being born early, being born unfinished, may be the single most important thing that ever happened to the human mind. Because when you are born before your brain is wired, your brain gets wired by the world. Other animals are born with brains largely pre-configured. A foal knows to stand, a duckling knows to follow. You knew almost nothing. But that blank slate is the point. The human brain at birth is about 25% of its adult volume. By age 1, it doubles. By age 3, it reaches roughly 80%. No other primate grows the brain this fast, this late, this socially. That postnatal growth phase is when language gets mapped, when faces get recognized, when trust is built or broken, when the social brain, the circuitry that lets you read other minds, gets calibrated. All of this happens outside the womb in a social context because you arrived before it was finished. This is not a side effect. Researchers now argue this is the mechanism. A brain wired by the world is a brain that can adapt to any world. Tundra, rainforest, desert, city, we colonized them all because our brains weren't preset for any of them. But flexibility has a price. And that price is paid by everyone around the helpless infant. No other primate requires this much parental investment for this long. Chimpanzees nurse for about 4 years, humans nurse longer and remain dependent for far longer still. This is why anthropologists believe our extended helplessness drove the development of something unusual: alloparenting. Alloparenting, other individuals beyond the parents helping to raise the young. The grandmother hypothesis, developed by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes, proposes that grandmothers in particular were critical. Post-reproductive women who helped feed and protect grandchildren dramatically improved offspring survival and may have extended the human lifespan itself. Helplessness didn't just shape the infant, it shaped the whole social architecture around it. It created the conditions for empathy, for teaching, for cumulative culture. You can only teach a creature that stays still long enough to be taught. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening inside that undersized skull. At birth, a human brain has roughly 80 to 100 billion neurons. But the connections between them, the synapses, are mostly not made yet. In the first years, the brain makes synaptic connections at a rate of 1 million per second. 1 million per second. What those connections wire into depends almost entirely on what the infant experiences. This is why early deprivation has such profound and lasting effects on human cognition and emotional regulation. The brain isn't finished. The world finishes it. There's one more layer here that doesn't get enough attention: the mechanics of birth itself. Human birth is uniquely, extraordinarily complicated. A chimp baby exits the birth canal facing upward. Easy. The mother can reach down and guide it herself. A human baby must rotate as it descends and exits facing backward, away from the mother. This means she cannot easily assist the birth herself, which is why in every documented human society, birth is attended by others. Birth itself is a social event. The helplessness started before the first breath. Karen Rosenberg and Wenda Trevathan published work in 2002 suggesting that the need for obstetric assistance is itself ancient, possibly as old as Homo erectus. We have needed each other from the very first moment. Let's run the full chain one more time, because it really is remarkable. Bipedalism selects for a narrower pelvis. Intelligence selects for a bigger brain. Big brain through narrow hips means early birth. Early birth means a helpless, unfinished infant. Helpless infant demands sustained social care. Sustained social care selects for empathy, language, teaching, and a brain wired by experience in a social world becomes a brain capable of culture, art, science, and whatever this whole civilization project turns out to be. You were not born helpless despite being human. You were born helpless because of what being human requires. The indignity of those first helpless months, the floppy neck, the undirected screaming, the complete inability to do a single useful thing is the price of admission to the most complicated mind on the planet. You started as the most helpless animal in the savannah, and you ended up here. Not bad for something that couldn't hold its own head up. File closed. If you find the evolutionary story behind being human as quietly bewildering as we do, you know where we are. More files to open.